السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. طيب, inshallah, today we will discuss, let me get rid of these drawings, the next line. We stopped right here. ومس الذكر. He says, رحمه الله, ومس الذكر بلا حائل بباطن الكف أو الأصابع أو بجنبيهما. So, from the things that nullify wudu are ahdath and asbab. We began with asbab, and one of the asbab which we'll cover today is mas al-dhakar, touch the men's private parts. This is again one of the very old issues of ikhtilaf, and the ikhtilaf goes back to difference in ahadith. There are sahih, authentic narrations from some of the Sahaba in which they say that touching the private parts does not nullify wudu. And they give evidence of this. And they say that it's just as touching any other part of your body. Whereas on the other side, we have a hadith where they narrate that the Prophet ﷺ said that touching the private parts would nullify wudu. And the most famous of which is the hadith of Busra. Busra is a woman. And the Hanafis who say that touching does not nullify wudu, they like to neglect this hadith by saying that a woman's narration does not equal a man's. Uh, they like to say that the hadith is a euphemism. In the hadith, it says, "Man massa dhakarah," whoever has touched uh, his dhakar. And the dhakar is the shaft. So it does not refer to the untayayn, which is the testicles of man. It's just the shaft. That's the dhakar. So in the hadith, it says, "Man massa dhakarah." Some have said that this is literal. And as I said, the Hanafis say, no, this might be a euphemism. If we assume that it is authentic, then this might be a euphemism for someone urinating. It might be a euphemism for something else. And so the khilaf is old and has evidences on both sides. The standard Maliki position, the mashhur position that Sheikh Khalil in his Mukhtasar took is that of the Maghariba. As mentioned before, many times in the Malikiya there are different schools. The Maghariba are different than the Egyptians and are different than the Iraqis, who are different than the Hijazis. So within the school we have a few views. And the standard mashhur position that Shaykh Khalil and all those after him relied upon is that مس الذكر بلا حائل بباطن الكف أو الأصابع أو بجنبيهما. So it will break wudu if a man were to touch his parts without a ha'il. A ha'il means something in between or a cover. So it could refer to wearing underwear or pants or being covered by a blanket. It can also refer to wearing gloves with your hand while there's nothing covering your private part. So any ha'il, anything in between is uh, it's a condition for it to break wudu. For it to break wudu, there has to be no ha'il. And the reason this condition is given is because one of the narrations it has a ziyada. One of these hadith, most of them, most of these hadith just say masud dhakar, just say touching the parts. However, one of the narrations, and I believe it's from Ibn Abbas, he says he adds the qaid of bila ha'in. So if one were to touch his parts while he was wearing clothing or while he had gloves on his hand, it would not break his wudu. So it breaks wudu, masud dhakar, it has the first condition. Condition number one, bila ha'in. The second condition is pertaining to what part of the hand is touching it. So it has to be بباطن الكف or الأصابع أو بجنبيهما. So it has to be باطن الكف. الباطن is the inside or the underside. باطن الكف is the inside of the palm. So if you take your hand, and obviously my camera is not turned on, but everyone knows what the inside of their hand is, inside of their palm. So anything in their forearm or from above the elbow, it's just from the wrist. It's the palm of the hand. It has to be from the inside. That's batin al-kaf. Or the fingers. So the fingers, it can be from the inside of the fingers or with the sides of the fingers. So the back side of the hand does not break wudu. So if one were to touch his private parts, even without a ha'il, there's nothing, there's no clothes, there's nothing. But if it's with the back of the hand, then it does not break wudu. It has to be the inside of the palm, or the inside of the fingers, or the sides of the fingers. Not the back side of the fingers, or the back side of the palm, or any other part of the forearm, or other parts of your body, like your foot or shoulder, or whatever it may be. So this is the first condition. Bila ha'in, there has to be nothing covering. And the second condition is the pertaining to the parts of the hand that are touching. This is the mashhur of the school. And according to this mashhur, and the reason why it is laid out is because, as we said, we are talking about asbab. Asbab are reasons for why a hadath may occur. If one were to touch his private parts, it may arouse a feeling of warmth within and a feeling of shahwa. When that happens, it is usually done with the inside of the hand. However, when it's done with when touching occurs with the backside of the hand, or with the elbow, or with knees, or whatever side, it's generally not considered something that moves the shahwa within. And as we discussed both last class and before, just because this is the reason for why it breaks wudu, it doesn't mean it has to actually occur, right? Again, I give the example of sleeping. Just because the reason sleeping breaks wudu is because one may pass gas, it doesn't mean you have to actually pass gas to break wudu while sleeping. Sleeping becomes a sabab. Anything that becomes a sabab, it breaks wudu whether the thing it is a sabab for happens or not. So similarly, according to the mashhur, if one were to touch with the inside of his hands, it would break wudu regardless of whether somebody felt the shahwa or he didn't feel the shahwa. It is not relevant. So even if someone were to touch by accident and feel nothing from it, it would still break wudu. Now, before we get into a bit of comparing and contrasting, to cover the full hukum according to the mashhur, there's some things not mentioned here. First of all, the fuqaha who took the opinion that touching the private parts breaks wudu, They differed on some other things, such as wood touching the dubur. The dubur is the back. Dubur in the Arabic language means the back, and it refers to uh, the hole from which the human defecates. They differed. If one were to touch it, would it break wudu? And according to the Malikiya, it does not break wudu. A second thing they differed on, when the hadith says that touching the parts breaks wudu, does it only refer to one's own parts, or does it also refer to other people? So if I were to, for whatever reason, by accident, touch somebody else's private parts without a ha'il, for whatever random scenario that might have led to this, that's not relevant. Would that break my wudu or not? And the mashhur is that it does not break wudu. If someone were to touch somebody else's parts, then the hukum that we look at is the hukum we discussed last class, which is touching in general, right? We talked about touching women's skin and touching someone who you have a ada, someone who you are normally someone who you normally feel that attraction to. That's how we treat it. So the unrestricted breaking of wudu from touching men's private parts, it only refers to one's own parts, right? And another mas'ala, they differ. That's the second mas'ala. The third mas'ala they differed on is again the testicles, the untayn. And as we already mentioned, according to the Malikiya, this is not covered in the hadith. This is not mentioned when we say the word dhakar. It only refers to the shaft, the long part. And the last thing they differed on is when it comes to a woman. If a man touching his own front private parts breaks wudu, does a woman touching her front private parts break her wudu? And one of the narrations of من مس ذكره, it also refers to a woman. It says if a woman touches her private parts, it also breaks wudu. However, this narration is rejected. So there's no narration. What is left is qiyas. And according to the qiyas, there's no valid reason to uh, to have it as a nullifier of wudu. So a woman touching her private parts does not nullify her wudu, with one exception. إذا الطفت. Al-iltaf is a fa'il, it's a thing where if fingers are inserted into the inside, that's when it would break her wudu. However, simply touching it would not break her wudu. This is the mashhur, and this is the mashhur regarding the differed upon branches of the mas'ala. These four mas'ala that we discussed. Now, a second view exists within the madhab, and this view was dominated by the Iraqi Malikis. The way they treated this mas'ala is similar to how we treat the mas'ala of touching a woman's skin. What does that mean? So according to them, according to the Iraqi Malikis, if one were to touch his private parts with the intention of shahwa, or he found shahwa, then it would break wudu. However, if neither of those things occurred, then it would not break wudu. So we would make the same, Punnett square that we made last time. And we would treat it the exact same way. This is how they treat it. And Al-Qadi, Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi, a famous author, he says that this is what al-amal is upon. According to him, this is what people are acting upon from Imam Malik's madhab. So that seems to be the case in Iraq. So it's not a matter of differing with Imam Malik. It's different narrations regarding how to understand Imam Malik, uh, and both of them have good precedent. However, the mashhur opinion does a better job of combining all the ahadith because, as we mentioned, there is one narration which mentions the concept of a ha'il. Now, the Iraqi Malikis, because they treat it differently, they say that it would a ha'il is irrelevant. According to the Iraqis, if you feel a shahwa from touching it, or you found shahwa or intended shahwa from touching it, then will break your wudu regardless of whether or not there is a ha'il. They also say it doesn't matter what part of your hand. Or doesn't even have to be your hand. They say that it can be, with the elbow. It could be with your knees. It can be with your whatever part of your body can reach it. It doesn't matter as long as it is you touching. It is a part of your body touching that part of the body. And so the theory behind why it is a sabab and how we treat it as a sabab is a little different. And so the mashhur, again, both views are valid, but the view that more aligns with what seems to be narrated from Imam Malik is the mashhur view, and that's why uh, it is what the Maghariba narrated and what the people of the West narrated, and that is what the mashhur settled upon. And the Iraqis, as we know, became extinct as a school, and so all we have is their narrations. So it's not one of these matters where there's different amal within the school, where you have two different groups of Malikis practicing two different actions, such as, half of Malikis doing sadl and half of Malikis doing qalb. Um, because the group who believes in this Iraqi view, they just happen to go extinct as a school, as a group of scholars, but their views were narrated and they survived within the other Malikiya. طيب. Is there any questions about this mas'ala? I see a question from 20 minutes ago. I think they also say that they have a hadith that it doesn't nullify. I'm not sure if you're referring to a specific group.
The Hanafis.
Yes, yes. As we mentioned, yeah, as we mentioned, they do have their own hadith. We mentioned in the very beginning that this khilaf goes back to the fact that there is different narrations from both. In fact, the main hadith of the Malikiya and the other Ahl Hadith, as we said, is called the Hadith of Busra, the woman named Busra. And the whole reason we have that hadith is because other Sahaba were were so sure of the fact that it didn't break wudu. And then someone told them that, Busra heard that it does. And I think I'm not sure if it was a Zubair or Abdullah ibn Zubair who asked her, did you actually, he heard that she heard this and he went to her and did he actually say this? He was so surprised because he had heard a different thing. Yeah, so as we said, there are different views. Sorry, not views, different narrations regarding this. Most of the ones the Hanafis rely on, the vast majority are mawquf, meaning the Sahabis don't add it or don't give it the idafa, the attribution of saying the Prophet ﷺ said this. Usually it just stops at the Sahabi. So the view of uh, the Malikiya is a little stronger from the Hadith perspective. And Imam Bukhari says this as well. He says that uh, while everyone acknowledges that there is Hadith for both sides, he says the Hadith of Busra is simply the strongest that is narrated regarding this topic, obviously with the many objections of the Hanafis. And the Imam al-Tahawi, in his Sharh of Hadith, he goes and attacks it from many different views, and it's a whole thing. If there's no other questions about this, we can begin with the next category. So, the things that nullify wudu are ahdath and asbab. So there are incidents, and then there are the reasons for those incidents. Then we have a third category. ما ليس بحدث ولا سبب وهي. So the third category are things that are neither a hadath nor a sabab. So it's neither an incident that nullifies wudu, nor is it a reason for an incident that nullifies wudu. And what is it? The first one is الردة أعاذنا الله منها. Ridda, apostasy from Islam. May Allah protect us from that. It nullifies wudu. Uh, والشك. It's pretty straightforward. One who becomes an apostate has to redo their tahara. There's no side issues to discuss. There are some ikhtilafat regarding the illah, regarding the reason behind it, but it's not worth mentioning at this level. It is something more of an usuli, and it's more of an usuli matter and a matter of qawa'id fiqhiyya. So an apostasy would break wudu, and there's not an incident, nor is it a nullifier of an incident. So even if someone were to become an apostate and then, 30 seconds later come back to Islam without having done anything, without having gone to the bathroom or done, it would still break his wudu. والشك. So the first one, الردة. The second one is الشك, doubt. This is a very controversial opinion. It's complicated to explain. The famous rule in Islam, based on the hadith, is that اليقين لا يزول بالشك. Certainty is not removed by doubt. Meaning, if someone were to have certainty about his wudu, then the doubt regarding, so if I'm certain I made wudu, but then I felt something as if I might have passed gas, but I'm not certain. It's a doubt, right? I have a doubt that I might have passed gas. It's like 50-50 for me. I can't tell. According to the majority of the fuqaha, this does not break wudu. However, according to the mashhur of the Malikiyya, it may break wudu. والشك فإن تيقن الحدث وشك في الطهارة أو تيقنهما وشك في السابق منهما فلا وضوء عنده مطلقا. So if he is certain about a hadath, meaning he is certain he went to the bathroom, for example, and he has doubt regarding whether he made tahara after that, his wudu is broken. And if he is certain of both of them, meaning he's certain he went to the bathroom and he's certain he made wudu, but he doubts which one came first. He doubts whether he made wudu after he went to the bathroom or before he went to the bathroom. So in both of these scenarios, clearly his wudu is broken. In the other scenario, وَإِن تَيَقَّنَ الطَّهَارَ.
Can you just
Yes.
repeat that?
Sorry, again.
Can you just please repeat that again?
So, so the first scenario, if he is certain that hadath has occurred, if he is certain that he has nullified wudu, but he is doubtful whether he made wudu, then he doesn't have wudu. This is the first scenario. The second scenario, if he is certain that he nullified his wudu, and he is certain that he made wudu, but he's not sure which one came first. He's not sure if he made wudu after he nullified it or if he nullified it after he made wudu. Meaning he remembers he went to the bathroom and he remembers he made wudu, but he's not sure which one came first. In this scenario, he also does not have wudu. His wudu would be nullified. Make sense?
Yes.
Yes. So, the next scenario. وإن تيقن الطهارة وشك في الحدث. Meaning, if he is certain he has wudu and he doubts whether he nullified it, فإن كان الشك يعتاده كل يوم ولو مرة واحدة ألغاه. Meaning, if this doubt is something that he is used to every single day, even if it is just one occurrence, then he doesn't act upon it. This is someone who has waswasa. He doesn't act upon waswasa. Meaning, if you have wudu, let's continue. If you have it every day, then it is ignored. It is nothing. وإلا, otherwise, otherwise meaning that it doesn't happen to him every day. It's happened to him maybe 2 days a week, 3 days a week, one day a month, whatever. If it happens uh, at that level, قبل الصلاة توضأ وجوبا. He has to redo his wudu before salah as an obligation. وفي الصلاة أتمها. فإن زال عنه الشك فيها أو بعدها وإلا وجب عليه الوضوء والإعادة. Meaning, if the doubt occurs to him within the salah, then he continues. He doesn't end his salah immediately. So while he is in salah, that doubt has to be removed. فإن زال عنه الشك فيها أو بعدها وإلا وجب عليه الوضوء والإعادة. Meaning, right, you have certainty of wudu. You began the prayer, and then within that prayer, you got a doubt that within the prayer you felt something, and you got a doubt that you might have broken your wudu. You don't end it. You continue. If that doubt goes away during the prayer or after it, then you are fine. However, if that doubt doesn't go away, then you have to remake your wudu and remake your prayer. Now, these last two are the controversial ones because they seem to go the against the hadith and against the rule that comes from this hadith. And Imam al-Tadrib actually says yes, it does, but he says the reason that we have to do this. There's actually two different arguments that the Malikiya give. Um, I'm going to mention Imam al-Dardir's one because it is a little simpler. He says the reason we give this fatwa is because salah requires a level of certainty, and making wudu is a simple thing. If we are asking if we're asking the people to make wudu again, at the benefit of having more certainty that their prayer is correct, then it is an easy fatwa to give. Even if it is في نفس الأمر, theoretically, maybe it's possibly not in line with the hadith, but when there is a possibility of adding more certainty, then we take it. Because this added certainty does not come at a high cost. It does not come at the cost of ghulu. It does not come at the cost of being extreme and having waswasa. It is just asking someone to remake wudu. And that's why the condition is added, that if this person is doubtful all the time, then it does not apply to him. It is only referring to people who get this doubt every now and then. However, if somebody has waswasa, then this fatwa would not apply to him, and um, he would not act upon the doubt. The second explanation, which is a little more strange, or not exactly in line with the qawaid, but it's beneficial to mention it anyway. The second explanation is that uh, is that tahara, as-salah and other forms of ibadah require yaqeen. They require certainty because the dhimma, what is, what you owe, regardless of other people or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this case, what you owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the dhimma is not innocent. There's no bara'at al-dhimma except through yaqeen, meaning what you owe is not removed except if you are certain, right? The bara'at al-dhimma la tazul illa bil yaqeen. So they say if somebody has doubts regarding their prayer, then they can't have said that they've done the prayer and that they've done what they owe because they are not certain about it. And so that you would need to remake your wudu to have certainty so that the prayer is considered valid and fulfilled. Now, this view it goes sharply against the hadith, and that's why I don't think it's worthwhile to mention, but just to know that this exists. And the reason this view um, doesn't seem to be correct is because it is talking about yaqeen in a literal sense, not in a shar'i sense. Because in a shar'i sense, the hadith says, لا يزول the qaida says that the yaqeen does not go away because of shak, because of doubt. That certainty is not removed by doubt. So in a shar'i sense, even if somebody has doubt, if somebody has doubt in a literal sense, in a actual literal sense, his brain has doubt. In a shar'i sense, we treat that doubt as if it is not there. And the reason we treat it as if it is not there is because of the hadith. The hadith says that act as, leave that doubt and remain upon what you were certain upon before. If you had certainty about it, then you remove that doubt. So therefore, if we're acting upon the hadith and we're acting upon this qaida that exists, then the second explanation we give does not make sense because the person who enters salah upon a state of certainty of wudu and then doubt occurs to him, they would argue that his salah cannot be fulfilled because his dhimma cannot be fulfilled except with certainty. But you would argue back that his salah was fulfilled with certainty. It was fulfilled with certainty in a shar'i sense because the doubt that came to him in a literal physical sense, it's not acted upon shar'an. Al-ma'dum shar'an kal-ma'dum hissan. This qaida, we say it all the time. What is absent in a shar'i sense, we treat it as if it is absent in a literal sense. Because at the end of the day, this is not a mu'amala, this is not a transaction or um, a contract between a person and a person. This is just a ibadah. It's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is absent in a shar'i sense, it is absent in a literal sense. And so the first explanation for why this fatwa is given, which was the explanation of Imam Tadrib, is more correct, which is that this fatwa is given because it is worth giving someone a little extra work to avoid khilaf and to avoid doubt, even if it is theoretically might not be the strongest opinion, but just based on the hadith. But because it's easy for someone to remake their wudu if they have doubt, then we tell them in fatwa to remake your wudu. And that is the controversy. The Shafi'iyya, all not just the Shafi'iyya, the Hanafiya, the Hanabila, all the other fuqaha of the surviving schools, they all say that if someone were to have doubt, then you continue prayer and you don't act upon that doubt. We would say that um, um, you remake your wudu unless you are someone with waswasa, unless you are someone who receives doubts all the time, in which case you would ignore it. So there are 4 different masail regarding doubt. Any questions? Everything clear?
Yes.
طيب. جزاكم الله خيرا. We'll see you on Wednesday, inshallah. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Walaikum salam, Sheikh.